"Oh my God, I know who you are," said the abandoned girl when she saw the millionaire, but he was someone she never expected him to be. Watch until the very end. Let me know what you thought of this story by giving it a rating from 0 to 10 in the comments, and please subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on you. The sound of the German Oompa band echoed down Old World 3rd Street as Aurora walked among the Oktoberfest tourists, her small, bare feet stepping on the cobblestones of Milwaukee's historic downtown. At 4 years old, she already knew every corner, every shop window, every face that might offer her a few coins. The tattered blanket she carried on her back was her only real possession, a faded piece of fabric with an embroidery she couldn't read, an anchor intertwined with a rose. The little girl stopped in front of the Cathedral of St. John the Evangelist, where visitors were often more generous during the festival. Her large, dark eyes watched the happy families, all dressed in their typical German attire, as she held out her small, dirty hand. Some people passed without a glance, others left coins that she carefully tucked into the torn pocket of her dress. That's when she saw the man collapsed near the park benches. Arthur Blackwood had fainted during a heated argument with his business partner, Sterling Price, about the future of their construction firm. The stress of the last few months, the sleepless nights thinking about Violet, his daughter whom he had driven away 23 years ago, and the crushing loneliness of his empty house had taken their toll. At 52, he was on the ground, unconscious, while the party went on around him. Aurora approached slowly, the way she did with the injured stray cats she found in the alleys. The man wore expensive clothes, a well-tailored suit that contrasted with his haggard appearance, but it was the ring on his right hand that made the little girl's heart race. It was gold, with the same symbol embroidered on her blanket, the anchor and the rose. "Grandma Hazel always said he would come back," Aurora murmured to herself, remembering the stories her grandmother used to tell before she passed away 2 years ago. Stories about an important man, about a lost family, about a day when the descendant would be found. Arthur opened his eyes slowly, his head throbbing. The first thing he saw was a small, grimy child watching him with curiosity. He tried to get up, but dizziness stopped him. "Are you okay, mister?" Aurora asked, her sweet voice a stark contrast to her ragged appearance. Yes, thank you. Little one." Arthur tried to focus his vision. "Shouldn't you be with your parents?" Aurora tilted her head as if pondering the question. "Grandma Hazel said that Mr. Arthur Blackwood would return when the time was right." The name, spoken by this child, hit him like a lightning bolt. Arthur sat up abruptly, ignoring the vertigo. "How do you know my name?" "Grandma told stories," Aurora replied, showing him the embroidered symbol on her blanket, "about the man with the anchor and the rose, about the one who would come for the lost descendant." Arthur's hands trembled as he stared at the embroidery. It was identical to his family crest, the same one his father had engraved on his ring when he turned 18. The same symbol Violet had despised when she decided to leave home, pregnant and furious with the father she considered distant and cold. "Where is your grandmother now?" Arthur asked, his voice hoarse. Aurora's eyes filled with tears. "She went away 2 years ago. Said she was going to find Mommy in heaven, but that I had to stay and wait for the man with the anchor." Nafsh, the guilt Arthur had carried for decades, multiplied in that moment. Violet had vanished 5 years ago, after years of no contact. His ex-wife, Penelope, had left him, tired of living with a man tormented by regret. And now there was a child, possibly his granddaughter, living on the streets. "What's your name?" he asked, helping the girl carefully fold the blanket. "Aurora." Arthur closed his eyes. The name sounded familiar, like a distant echo of a conversation he might have overheard years ago. "Aurora, would you like to come with me?" I have a big house with warm food and a soft bed." The girl studied him with the precocious wisdom that life on the streets had given her. "Are you really the man with the anchor?" "I think so," Arthur replied, touching the ring he hadn't taken off in decades. Aurora nodded, as if that answer confirmed something she already knew in her heart. "Grandma Hazel said that when he arrived, I would know it in my heart." They walked together through the streets decorated for Oktoberfest, the well-dressed businessman and the barefoot girl, united by the symbol they carried and a destiny they did not yet fully understand. Arthur didn't know he was about to uncover secrets that would change not only his life, but also the lives of people he thought he had lost forever. When they arrived at his house, in the elegant Yankee Hill Historic District, a grand structure that reflected the success of his construction company, Aurora stopped at the door and looked up at the illuminated windows. "This is where the family will find each other again," she said, with a certainty that made Arthur wonder if this child knew much more than she let on. That night, while Aurora slept in a guest room for the first time in 2 years, Arthur called Edmund, the private investigator he had hired months ago to find Violet. It was time to intensify the search. He had a granddaughter to protect and a daughter to find. What he didn't know was that Sterling, his partner, was already planning how to use this unexpected situation to his advantage. The first rays of sun that streamed through the guest room window found Aurora wide awake, sitting on the enormous bed, observing every detail of the room. The light-colored walls, the polished wooden furniture, the soft carpet under her feet, it was all different from the dark corners where she used to sleep. She clutched her blanket to her chest, the only link to her former life. Arthur knocked gently on the door before entering, carrying a tray with fresh bread, milk, and fruit. He had slept little, tormented by questions that multiplied with each passing hour. How did this child know his family crest? Where was Violet? And why did he feel that Aurora knew more than she was revealing? "Good morning, little one," he said, placing the tray on the small table beside the bed. "Did you sleep well?" Aurora nodded shyly, but her eyes remained alert, like a wild animal ready to flee. "Are you going to send me away?" The question pierced Arthur's heart. "Never. This house needs some joy, and you remind me of someone very important." As Aurora ate slowly, savoring each bite of bread as if it were her last, Arthur received a call from Edmund. The investigator had news about Violet. "I found a solid lead in Chicago," Edmund said from the other end of the line. "A woman working as a cleaner at Regional Hospital using the name Christina Smith. The physical description matches, but she's changed a lot. Too thin, premature gray hair." Arthur's heart pounded. "Are you sure it's her?" "The scar on her right arm is identical to the one you described. A Blackwood family birthmark, isn't it?" "Yes," Arthur murmured, unconsciously touching the same scar on his own arm. "I'm going to Chicago today." Across the room, Aurora had stopped eating and was watching Arthur intently. When he ended the call, she approached and touched his right arm, exactly where the scar was hidden by his shirt sleeve. "Mommy has the same mark," she said simply. Arthur froze. "How do you know that?" "Grandma Hazel showed me in an old picture. She said it was the sign of the true family." Aurora ran to her blanket and, to Arthur's surprise, opened a small seam in the hem, revealing a yellowed photograph. "She saved this for me." The photo showed a young woman in her 20s holding a baby. Arthur recognized her immediately. It was Violet, his daughter, and in her arms was a tiny child. On the back of the photo, a shaky handwriting read, "Aurora, 6 months, daughter of Violet Blackwood." Arthur's legs gave out. Aurora was his granddaughter. Violet had had a daughter, and for some reason, the child had ended up in the care of a woman named Hazel. "Why didn't your grandmother look for me?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. "She said you were suffering a lot." That you had lost your wife and it wasn't the right time yet. She said that when I was left alone, fate would lead me to you. Arthur hugged Aurora, feeling for the first time in years a responsibility that went beyond his own troubles. He had a granddaughter to care for and a daughter to bring back. When he arrived at the construction company that morning, bringing Aurora with him because he didn't want to leave her alone, he found Sterling waiting with a dark expression. "Arthur, we need to talk," Sterling said, eyeing the child with suspicion. "What's this about bringing a street kid into the office?" "She is not a street kid. She's my granddaughter," Arthur replied with a firmness that surprised even himself. Sterling laughed with disdain. "Your granddaughter? Arthur, you're losing your mind. First this obsession with finding Violet, now this. The clients are starting to question your stability." "My personal life doesn't interfere with the business," Arthur said, but he knew it wasn't entirely true. In recent months, he had lost some important contracts due to lack of focus. "Yes, it does. A lot." Sterling moved closer, lowering his voice. "I have a proposal. Sell me your share of the company. You get rich, retire, take care of this child, and I'll keep the business running." "Never!" "Think about it, Arthur. A traumatized child, a missing daughter. Are you sure you can handle a company and a family at the same time?" Aurora, who had been playing quietly in a corner with some pencils and paper, looked up. There was something in the way she watched Sterling that made Arthur uncomfortable. The child seemed to pick up on nuances that adults missed. That afternoon, Arthur traveled to Chicago with a heart torn between hope and fear. He left Aurora with Gertrude, his faithful housekeeper of 15 years, who welcomed the girl with motherly affection. Chicago's regional hospital smelled of disinfectant and suffering. Arthur waited in the parking lot until the end of the shift when he saw a thin, hunched woman exit through the employee gate. It took him a few seconds to recognize Violet. She had changed drastically. Her brown hair was streaked with gray, her face marked by premature wrinkles, and she walked with the posture of someone carrying invisible burdens. But when she turned slightly, Arthur saw the scar on her right arm and knew for sure. Violet. She stopped as if she'd been hit by an electric shock, then turned slowly. When her eyes met her father's, all the color drained from her face. "No," she whispered, "it can't be." "It's me, daughter. I've come to get you." Violet backed away, her hands trembling. "You don't understand. I can't. I don't deserve." "Why are you using a fake name? Why did you disappear?" "Because I'm a failure," Violet exploded, tears streaming down her face. "Because I had a daughter and I couldn't raise her. Because I gave my own baby to a stranger. Because I didn't even have food to offer her." Arthur's world stopped. "What daughter?" "Aurora. She was born when I was desperate, jobless, homeless. I met an elderly woman named Hazel at a church, and she offered to take care of her temporarily." "Temporarily?" Violet laughed bitterly. "When I went back 2 weeks later, they were gone. I looked everywhere, but I never found them again." "Violet," Arthur said softly, "Aurora is with me." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of distant traffic. Violet stared at him as if he had spoken in a foreign language. "What did you say?" "Your daughter is at home in Milwaukee. She found me 2 days ago." Violet collapsed right there in the hospital parking lot, sobbing in a way that made Arthur realize she had been holding this pain for years. When she could speak again, her voice was raw. "Is she okay? Is she safe?" "She is, and she wants to meet her mother." For the first time in 5 years, father and daughter embraced, united by the discovery that the family they thought they had lost forever still had a chance to reunite. But neither of them knew that back in Milwaukee, Sterling had already begun to set in motion a plan that could destroy everything before the reunion could even happen. The drive back to Milwaukee passed in a tense silence. Violet sat in the passenger seat, her hands clasped in her lap, trembling slightly despite the late October warmth. Arthur drove carefully, stealing furtive glances at the daughter he hadn't seen in 5 years. She seemed too fragile, as if a strong wind could break her. "Will she recognize me?" Violet asked for the 3rd time during the trip. "I don't know," Arthur admitted. "But she has a picture of you. Hazel told her stories about you." The name of the woman who had cared for Aurora made Violet cry silently. Hazel was a saint. I only wanted her to look after Aurora for 2 weeks, until I could find a better job. When I went back, the house was empty. The neighbors said she had moved out of state for health reasons. "Why did you never contact me? Why did you never tell me about the pregnancy?" Violet wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her hospital uniform. "Because you were married to Penelope, because I was young and proud, because I thought I could raise my daughter on my own." When they arrived in the Yankee Hill district, night had fallen over Milwaukee. The Oktoberfest lights still shone downtown, but here at Arthur's house, everything was quiet. Violet paused at the entrance, looking at the elegant building where she had grown up and from which she had stormed out at 19, pregnant and furious. "It looks the same," she murmured. "On the outside, yes. Inside, it's been empty for a long time." Gertrude met them at the door with a warm smile and curious eyes. "Mr. Blackwood, little Aurora is asleep." It was a hard day for her. "Why?" Arthur asked, concerned. "She asked so many questions about the family, about where her mother was, about when you would all meet. She cried a little before falling asleep, but she said they were happy tears because she knew her mother was coming." Violet covered her face with her hands. The thought of her daughter crying while waiting for her was almost unbearable. They went up silently to the room where Aurora was sleeping. The girl was curled up in her tattered blanket, even though clean, soft blankets were available. On her small face was a serene smile that both broke and mended Violet's heart at the same time. "She's beautiful," Violet whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She has her father's eyes." Arthur looked at her, surprised. "Who is the father?" "A boy I met when I was lost. He didn't want to take responsibility, said I was too young, that I had my whole life ahead of me." Violet gently stroked Aurora's hair. "But she's perfect. Despite all my mistakes, she's perfect." The next morning, Aurora woke before sunrise, as she always had since living on the streets. She went down silently to the kitchen, where she found a strange woman sitting at the table, watching her with eyes red from crying. "You're my mother," Aurora said without hesitation. Violet nodded, unable to speak. Aurora approached slowly and reached out, touching her mother's face as if to memorize every detail. "Grandma Hazel said you had a sick heart and needed time to heal. Are you better now?" "I am," Violet managed to say, pulling her daughter into a tight hug. "Now I am." The reunion could have been perfect if Sterling hadn't chosen that morning to execute the first part of his plan. While Arthur was distracted by the family reunion, Sterling had spent the night at the company office, altering documents and transferring important contracts to shell companies he secretly controlled. When Arthur arrived at work, bringing Aurora and Violet to introduce them to the staff, he found Sterling with a satisfied expression and a stack of papers on his desk. "Arthur, we need to sign these documents urgently. Trouble with the IRS. If we don't sort this out today, we could lose our business license." Arthur quickly skimmed the papers, preoccupied with issues that seemed too technical for that moment. "I can't analyze this now, Sterling. I just found my daughter." "Exactly my point," Sterling said with false sympathy. "You're emotionally compromised. Let me handle the business while you sort out your family situation." Aurora, who was drawing in the corner of the office, stopped and watched the conversation. There was something in Sterling's tone that bothered her. A falseness she recognized from her time on the streets, when she had to distinguish between people who genuinely wanted to help and those with ulterior motives. Grandpa, she said suddenly, using the affectionate term for Arthur for the first time, the man is lying. The ensuing silence was awkward. Sterling forced a laugh. Kids say the darndest things, don't they? But Arthur looked at Aurora intently. He had learned in the past few days that his granddaughter had a keen perception of people. Why do you think that, little one? He's nervous, just like the bad men who tried to take me from the square. Aurora pointed at Sterling. His hands are sweating and he can't stop fidgeting with his fingers. Sterling quickly hid his hands behind his back. But the damage was done. Arthur began to examine the documents more carefully, and what he saw alarmed him. Contracts he didn't remember authorizing, property transfers to companies he didn't know. Sterling, what is this? They're necessary adjustments to keep the company afloat. You've been very absent, Arthur. Someone has to make decisions. Violet, who had remained quiet, observing the dynamic, approached Arthur. Dad, I think it's best not to sign anything until we can review it all calmly. Violet's presence seemed to irritate Sterling even more. Now you're taking advice from someone who abandoned her family and became a janitor? The insult was like a slap in the face. Violet recoiled, but Aurora stood up and walked over to Sterling with the courage only children possess. My mom isn't a janitor. She's a nurse and she takes care of sick people. That's a lot more important than you. The revelation surprised even Arthur. Violet, you're a nurse. I studied at night for 5 years, she replied shyly. I work as a cleaner during the day and as a nursing assistant at night. It's all I could manage. The pride Arthur felt for his daughter was interrupted by the ringing of his phone. It was Edmund, calling urgently. Arthur, I need to see you immediately. I've discovered something about Sterling that you need to know. By the time Arthur finished the call, Sterling had already gathered the documents and was heading for the door. Let's leave this conversation for later. You're clearly in no condition to make important decisions. Sterling, Arthur called out, his voice firm. From now on, I'm not signing anything without my lawyer reviewing it first. Your lawyer? Violet is going to law school. She was always smarter than both of us. The lie came out naturally, but Arthur saw his daughter's eyes light up. Maybe it wouldn't be a lie for long. When Sterling left, slamming the door, Aurora ran to Arthur and held his hand. Grandpa, that man is going to try to hurt our family. Why do you think so? Because Grandma Hazel always said, those who lie about small things lie about big things too. That afternoon, a summer thunderstorm hit Milwaukee with unusual fury. Aurora was watching the rain from the window when she saw a tiny kitten being swept away by the floodwater in the street. Without hesitation, she ran outside, ignoring the shouts of Violet and Arthur. The cold water lashed at her legs as she approached the frightened animal. Carefully, she picked up the kitten and brought it inside, soaked but smiling. Why did you do that? Violet asked, drying her daughter with a towel. You could have gotten hurt. Because he was alone and scared, Aurora answered simply. Just like I was before I found Grandpa. Arthur watched the scene and felt something unfamiliar growing in his chest. True paternal love, not based on guilt or obligation, but on genuine admiration for this brave child that fate had placed in his life. When the storm passed and they were dry and safe in the living room, Edmund arrived with news that would change everything. Arthur, your partner has been transferring company properties to offshore accounts for 6 months, and there's more. He forged your signature on several documents. Arthur's world collapsed in that moment. But when he looked at Aurora playing with the kitten she had saved and Violet smiling for the first time in years, he realized there were more important things than money. What he didn't know was that the biggest revelation was yet to come, hidden in a rag doll that Aurora guarded as if it were the greatest treasure in the world. The discovery of Sterling's betrayal left Arthur in a state of shock that lasted for days. The forged documents, the illegal transfers, and the diverted contracts represented not just a devastating financial loss, but the destruction of 20 years of honest work. Sitting in his study, surrounded by papers and evidence of the betrayal, he felt lost. Violet had taken on the role of organizer, sorting documents and trying to understand the extent of the problem. Her limited experience with hospital administration proved valuable, and she worked with a determination that impressed her father. "We need to file a lawsuit immediately," she said, examining a suspicious transfer of a valuable piece of land, "but it will be difficult to prove you didn't authorize these transactions." No. Aurora was playing in the corner of the room with her rag doll, the same one she had carried since Hazel passed away. It was a simple doll, made of colorful scraps, with yellow yarn hair and embroidered eyes. To any observer, it looked like just an old, worn-out toy, but to Aurora it was much more. "Is Grandpa sad because of the money?" she asked, interrupting the adult's conversation. Arthur knelt beside his granddaughter. "I'm worried, little one. The bad man took important things that weren't his." Aurora nodded seriously. "Grandma Hazel always said that when people steal, they leave tracks, like birds leaving footprints in the mud." "What kind of tracks, sweetie?" Violet asked, moving closer. "She said she hid the tracks where the bad man would never look." Aurora looked at her doll lovingly. "In hope." "Hope?" Arthur repeated. "That's my doll's name. Grandma Hazel said that one day I would understand why she's named that." A suspicion began to grow in Violet's mind. Hazel had been a smart and cautious woman, someone who had protected Aurora for 2 years and seemed to know a lot about the Blackwood family. Could she have left more than just stories and photographs? "Aurora, may I see Hope?" The girl hesitated for a moment, then handed the doll to her mother. Violet examined it carefully, feeling the fabric, observing the seams. There was something different about the doll's belly, a small irregularity that didn't feel normal. "Mom, there's something inside," Violet said, running her fingers over the seam. With extreme care, she opened a small slit in the back of the doll. Inside the cotton stuffing, her fingers found a sealed plastic envelope. Everyone's heart raced as she pulled it out. Inside the envelope was a folded letter and a small golden key. The letter was written in the same shaky handwriting Arthur recognized from the back of the photograph. Violet read it aloud. "My dearest Aurora, if you are reading this, it means you have found your true family. I always knew this day would come. The key that comes with this letter opens a safe deposit box at Merchants Trust Bank, downtown Milwaukee branch 1234, box 789. Stored there are things that will help your family recover what was stolen. Your grandfather is a good man, but he trusted the wrong person. I knew this even before you were born. I protected you, and I protected the family's secrets. Use them wisely, with eternal love, Hazel." The silence that followed was broken by the sound of Aurora clapping her hands happily. "I knew Grandma Hazel had left help for us." Arthur took the key with trembling hands. How did she know about Sterling? How did she know he was going to betray me? "Grandma was very smart," Aurora replied. "She used to say that watching people was like reading a book, and that greedy men always showed who they were when they thought no one was looking." The next morning, the three of them went to Merchants Trust Bank. The manager, a middle-aged man named Klaus, greeted them with curiosity. It wasn't every day a 4-year-old child participated in the opening of a safe deposit box. "The box was rented 3 years ago by an elderly lady," Klaus explained, checking the documents. "Hazel Goodman. She specifically stated that only someone with this key and accompanied by a child named Aurora could access it. When the box was opened, its contents left them speechless. There were photographs of the Blackwood family dating back decades, original property deeds that Arthur thought he had lost, and most importantly, audio recordings of conversations between Sterling and third parties discussing how to gradually take over the construction company's assets. "How did she get this?" Arthur murmured, listening to his own voice on one of the recordings, clearly drunk, as Sterling persuaded him to sign documents. A final discovery at the bottom of the box answered the question, a fake ID in Hazel's name, but with a different woman's photo. The real name was Mary Ann Smith, and she had been a private investigator for 15 years before retiring. "Grandma was a detective," Aurora said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "She told me, but she said not to tell anyone until the right time." Violet laughed through her tears, a retired investigator who decided to protect a family she didn't even know personally. "But why?" Arthur asked. Aurora pulled another paper from the box, a letter addressed specifically to him. "Mr. Blackwood, my real name is Mary Ann Smith. I met your daughter Violet when she was pregnant and desperate. She told me about you, about the family, about the pride that separated you. I decided to investigate on my own and discovered you were a good man who had made mistakes, not a monster. When Violet brought me Aurora, I promised myself I would protect this child and find a way to reunite the family when possible. Sterling Price has been dangerous for years, but you were blinded by friendship. I hope this evidence helps you recover not only your assets, but also your dignity. Aurora is special, Mr. Blackwood. She has the wisdom to recognize people's hearts. Always trust her. Mary Ann Smith, Hazel." With the evidence in hand, Edmund managed to reverse almost all the illegal transfers within weeks. Sterling was forced to return the properties and also faced charges for forgery and embezzlement, but the victory came at an unexpected price. Penelope, Arthur's ex-wife, showed up at the house one cold November afternoon. She was clearly pregnant and brought with her a proposal no one expected. "Arthur, I need you to sign the divorce papers," she said bluntly. "I'm marrying Robert in December, and I need to sort out my situation." Penelope's presence created immense discomfort in the house that had become a warm home. Aurora hid behind Violet, and even the kitten she had saved seemed to sense the tension in the air. "Are you sure?" Arthur asked, surprising everyone with his calm. "I am. Robert is a good man, and this baby deserves to grow up in a stable family." What Penelope didn't say, but what Aurora immediately sensed, was that she was afraid. Afraid that Arthur, now with a reunited family and a new perspective on life, might want to win her back. "Grandpa," Aurora whispered, pulling on Arthur's hand. "The lady is afraid you'll be sad and want her back." Penelope blushed, but Arthur knelt beside his granddaughter and smiled. "I won't be sad, little one. Sometimes people need to follow different paths to be happy." He signed the papers that same afternoon, officially ending a marriage that had emotionally ended years before. When Penelope left, the house seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. "How did you know she was scared?" Violet asked Aurora. "Grandma Hazel taught me, when people talk too loud, it's because they're trying to hide something small inside them." That night, as Aurora slept, cuddling with Hope and the kitten, Arthur and Violet talked about the future. The construction company was safe, the family was reunited, and for the first time in years, they both felt hopeful. But fate still had a surprise in store that would test the strength of this newly formed family in a way none of them could imagine. The month of December arrived with the festive air that transformed Milwaukee into a little tropical Germany. The streets filled with typical Christmas decorations, Christmas markets, and the scent of Lebkuchen and Glühwein that wafted through the squares. For Aurora, it would be her first Christmas with a family, an experience that made her both anxious and excited. Violet had secured a job at St. Elizabeth's Hospital, officially working as a nurse with a salary that gave her independence. She had moved into a small apartment near Arthur's house, close enough for daily visits but far enough for her to rebuild her self-esteem as a woman and a mother. It was on one of these December afternoons, as Aurora played in the garden, preparing a Christmas tree with branches she had collected, that she began to cough persistently. At first, it was just dry coughs that Arthur attributed to the dry Wisconsin winter air. But when the cough turned into difficulty breathing, he knew something was seriously wrong. "Grandpa, it hurts here," Aurora said, touching her small chest. Arthur and Violet rushed Aurora to the hospital in a panic. The diagnosis was severe pneumonia, complicated by malnutrition from her years on the streets. The girl's immune system had been compromised by months of deprivation, turning a simple infection into a life-threatening one. "We need to admit her immediately," said Dr. Evans, the pediatrician in charge. "The pneumonia is advanced, and she needs intensive care." Seeing Aurora connected to tubes and monitors broke Arthur's heart in a way he hadn't experienced even when he lost his wife. This child had become his reason for living, the light that had brought meaning back to his existence. Violet practically lived at the hospital during the admission, using her nursing knowledge to ensure Aurora received the best possible care. It was during one of these long vigils that she noticed something strange. One of the night shift nurses, a woman in her 40s named Sandra, seemed to know details about Aurora that weren't in her medical chart. She knew about old burn marks on the girl's arms, her night terrors, her tendency to sing softly when she was scared. "How do you know these things about my daughter?" Violet asked one night when she caught Sandra gently stroking Aurora's hair as the girl slept. Sandra hesitated, looking around nervously. I knew her before, when she lived on the streets." "You helped her?" "I tried. Whenever I could, I brought her food, medicine, but she was very wary." Sandra paused, tears welling up in her eyes. "There was an old woman who looked after her sometimes. Hazel. She told me about the girl's family." Violet's heart raced. "You knew Hazel." "She came to the hospital periodically to ask for basic medicines for Aurora. She said the girl was special, that she had an important family waiting for her. I stole some medication to help her." Sandra's confession revealed a network of people who had tried to protect Aurora during her most vulnerable years. Hazel had organized a small support community. Sandra at the hospital, Mrs. Edith from the bakery, who always saved day-old bread, and Mr. John from the market, who let Aurora pick up fallen fruit. "Why did you all do it?" Violet asked, moved. "Because Hazel told us that sometimes God puts little angels in our path to test if we still have any humanity left," Sandra replied. "Aurora was our angel." Meanwhile, Sterling, even while facing legal proceedings, had not given up his revenge against Arthur. Learning of Aurora's hospitalization, he began spreading rumors around town about Violet's dissolute life, suggesting she was an irresponsible mother who had abandoned her daughter. The rumors reached the ears of Child Protective Services through an anonymous tip. Sarah Jenkins, the assigned social worker, appeared at the hospital on an afternoon when Aurora had just started showing signs of improvement. "I need to assess the child's care conditions," she said, watching Violet with suspicion. "We've received information that the mother may not be fit to raise the girl." Arthur exploded with rage when he heard about the investigation. "My daughter is a qualified nurse and a devoted mother." "Mr. Blackwood, I understand your position, but I must follow protocol. The report mentions prior abandonment of the child." It was Aurora, still weak but lucid, who resolved the situation unexpectedly. When Sarah Jenkins approached her bed to ask questions, the girl looked her directly in the eyes. "You're sad," Aurora said softly. Sarah blinked, surprised. "Why do you think that?" Because you have to ask questions that hurt people. But my mommy is good. She sings to me when I have nightmares and knows exactly which medicine makes me feel better. Aurora's simplicity and sincerity touched the social worker's heart. She spent another 2 hours at the hospital observing the interaction between mother and daughter and became convinced that the report was baseless. "Who made the report?" Arthur asked as Sarah was leaving. "I can't disclose that, but I can say the person mentioned specific knowledge of your business dealings. It seems to be someone close to you." That night, Edmund confirmed Arthur's suspicions. Sterling had made the report using distorted information about Violet's past to try and tear the family apart again. "He doesn't give up," Edmund said. "Even after losing almost everything, he still wants to destroy what you've built." Sterling's malice ended up having the opposite effect. The CPS investigation brought to light the support network that had protected Aurora during her difficult years. Sandra, Mrs. Edith, Mr. John, and other local merchants came to the hospital to give statements about Violet's character and the evident love she showed for her daughter. "That woman looked for the girl every day," Mrs. Edith testified. "She went from house to house, street to street, asking for a child named Aurora. When she finally learned she was well cared for, she cried with relief." Sarah Jenkins herself was moved by the testimonies. "In 20 years of work, I have rarely seen a mother defended so vehemently by so many people." Aurora was discharged from the hospital on a sunny Christmas Eve morning. She was still weak, but her eyes shone with the joy of returning home. Violet carried her in her arms, as if she were the most precious treasure in the world, and Arthur walked beside them, carrying the kitten that had become his granddaughter's inseparable companion. When they arrived at the house, they found a surprise waiting for them. Gertrude had decorated the entire residence with traditional German Christmas ornaments. A gigantic Christmas tree dominated the living room, adorned with wooden angels, candles, and homemade gingerbread cookies. "Welcome to the first Christmas of the reunited Blackwood family," Gertrude said, drying her tears with her apron. Aurora looked around, amazed. "It's more beautiful than my dreams," she whispered. But the joy of the moment was interrupted when Violet noticed someone watching the house from across the street, a male figure who quickly hid behind a tree when he was spotted. "Dad," she said, pointing discreetly, "I think someone is watching us." Arthur went out to check, but when he reached the other side of the street, he found no one. On the ground, only a still smoldering cigarette butt and footprints in the mud suggested someone had been there for a while. That night, as Aurora slept peacefully in her bed, cuddling with Hope and the kitten, Arthur and Violet talked in the living room, illuminated by the Christmas tree. "Sterling won't give up easily," Arthur said. "He lost a lot of money, his reputation, and he knows he could end up in prison. What can we do? Protect our family and be prepared for anything." What neither of them knew was that the greatest revelation of their lives was about to unfold. Hidden in an antique toy shop in the historic downtown, where a second doll identical to Hope had been waiting for 3 years for its true owner to arrive. New Year's Eve brought with it an atmosphere of renewal that Milwaukee embraced with festivals and street celebrations. Aurora had fully recovered from pneumonia and was running through the garden with an energy that made up for the difficult days in the hospital. The kitten, which she had named Courage, followed her everywhere, creating an inseparable duo that brought constant smiles to Arthur and Violet. It was during a walk through the historic downtown that fate prepared another of its carefully orchestrated surprises. Aurora had insisted on visiting the traditional Old World 3rd Street, where she had spent so many days begging. But now, as a beloved and protected child, "I want to show people that I'm okay," she explained to Arthur, "so they won't be worried." The child's innocence deeply touched her grandfather's heart. Even having suffered on the streets, Aurora worried about the well-being of those who had shown her kindness. Walking along the street of old shops, Aurora stopped abruptly in front of a window displaying traditional German toys, her eyes fixed on a rag doll that was virtually identical to her Hope, same colorful scraps, same yellow yarn hair, same embroidered eyes. "Grandpa," she whispered, squeezing Arthur's hand, "it's Hope's sister." The shop owner, an elderly gentleman named Hermann Müller, noticed the family's interest in the doll and came out to greet them. His eyes lit up when he saw Aurora. "Mein Gott, you must be little Aurora," he exclaimed in his German-accented English. Arthur and Violet exchanged surprised glances. "How do you know my granddaughter?" Hermann smiled tenderly. "A very special lady came here 3 years ago. Hazel, if I'm not mistaken. She brought this doll and asked me to keep it until a little girl with eyes like diamonds came to claim it." "Hazel was here?" Violet asked, emotional, "several times. She said the doll had a very important mission." Hermann bent down to be at Aurora's eye level. "She said that when the true family found each other, little Aurora would know it was time to take the second doll home." Aurora approached the window, placing her small hand on the glass. "Does she have something special inside her too?" Hermann laughed softly. "Hazel said you would ask exactly that. Yes, little one, she does." Inside the shop, Hermann carefully removed the doll from the window and handed it to Aurora. The girl hugged it immediately, as if recognizing an old friend. It was obvious that both dolls had been made by the same person, with the same love and attention to detail. "Hazel left very specific instructions," Hermann said, handing a sealed envelope to Arthur. "This envelope was only to be opened in the child's presence, and only when she found the second doll." With trembling hands, Arthur opened the envelope. Inside was a letter and a small key, different from the first, this one with a more ancient and ornate shape. Violet read the letter aloud. "Dear Blackwood family, if you are reading this letter, it means you have overcome the first challenge and discovered the secrets I guarded to protect you. But there is one more truth that needs to be revealed, a truth that will explain why fate brought Aurora to you so specifically. The key that accompanies this letter opens a very special place in the house where Aurora was born. Look for 247 Palm Street in the attic of the Blue House. There you will find the final answer to all the questions that still torment you. Trust Aurora. She has always known more than she let on. With love and hope that the truth will finally set you all free. Hazel, Mary Ann." Hermann watched the scene with tears in his eyes. "Hazel made me promise to take care of this doll as if she were my own granddaughter. For 3 years, every day I looked at her and prayed for the family to find each other." Aurora, who had remained quiet examining the new doll, suddenly spoke with a maturity that surprised everyone. Grandma Hazel knew that people needed time to learn how to love each other again. The depth of the observation left the adults speechless. How could a 4-year-old child understand such complex family dynamics? Palm Street was in an older neighborhood of Milwaukee, where wooden houses from the first German immigrants still stood against time. Number 247 was a faded blue building, clearly abandoned for years, with boarded-up windows and an overgrown garden. "Is this the house where I was born?" Aurora asked, looking at the dilapidated facade. "Apparently so," Violet replied, consulting the documents she had found in the safe deposit box. "Hazel lived here when you were born." Using the old key, they managed to enter the silent house. The interior smelled of mold and neglect, but there was still furniture covered in sheets and dusty photographs on the walls. Aurora walked through the house as if she knew every room, guiding the adults to a narrow staircase that led to the attic. In the attic, lit only by a small window, they found what Hazel had left for them. An old wooden chest that the key opened easily. Inside the chest were documents, photographs, and a diary that would reveal the most impactful truth of their lives. The diary was written by Hazel herself, detailing not only her care for Aurora, but also her meticulous investigation into the Blackwood family. Page after page revealed that Hazel had discovered something that would change everything. Sterling was not just a greedy partner, but had been deliberately placed in Arthur's life by people who wanted to destroy the family. Sterling was hired 20 years ago by competitors of the construction company. Violet read, her voice trembling. His goal was always to gain Dad's trust and then destroy the company from within. But the most shocking revelation was in the last diary entry. Aurora asked today if I was her real grandmother. I had to explain that I am not, but that I love her as if I were. The truth is, I am Arthur's mother's sister. I'm Violet's great-aunt and Aurora's great-grandmother. The Blackwood family lost contact with me 40 years ago due to a family feud, but I always followed their lives from a distance. When I found Violet pregnant and desperate, I knew fate was giving me a chance to reunite the family again. Aurora has always known who I really was, but she waited patiently for the time to come for everyone to find out. The silence in the attic was broken by Aurora's sweet voice. Grandma Hazel said that some secrets are like seeds. They need time to grow in the right soil. Violet knelt beside her daughter, tears streaming down her face. You always knew she was our relative? Aurora nodded. She told me when I was very little. She said she had fought with the family because great-grandpa didn't like the man she wanted to marry, but she never stopped loving you. Arthur held the diary with trembling hands, trying to process the magnitude of the discovery. Hazel was his aunt, a woman who had been cast out of the family by her own father decades ago due to prejudices of the time. She had spent her entire life protecting the family from afar, and in the end had orchestrated the reunion of them all through her great-granddaughter. When they came down from the attic, carrying the chest with all the documents, they found someone waiting for them in the living room, Sterling, with an expression of uncontrolled fury. I thought you might be here, he said, blocking the exit. I always knew that old woman was hiding something. Now I'm going to find out what. Sterling's menacing presence in the abandoned house with Aurora present created a tension that made Arthur realize he had underestimated the danger of his former partner. But what none of them knew was that Aurora, once again, had a plan that would change everything. The tension in the abandoned house was palpable. Sterling blocked the only exit, his eyes fixed on the chest Arthur was carrying. There was something desperate in his posture, like a cornered animal that knew it was losing everything. Hand over what you found in there, he ordered, holding out his hand. You don't know what you're dealing with. Aurora, who was holding both dolls tightly, one in each arm, looked at Sterling with the same calm she showed when observing people on the streets. Then, to everyone's surprise, she let go of Violet's hand and walked towards him. You're scared, she said simply. Sterling flinched slightly, disarmed by the child's direct approach. I'm not scared of anything. Yes, you are. Grandma Hazel taught me that when people yell a lot, it's because they're scared of something small inside them. Aurora tilted her head, studying his face. You're scared that people will find out you're not as strong as you pretend to be. The observation hit Sterling like a sharp arrow. His entire life, he had built a facade of a powerful and ruthless man, but a 4-year-old child had seen through all his defenses in a matter of seconds. Shut up, girl, he muttered, but his voice trembled slightly. She's right, Arthur said, placing the chest on the floor. You've always been afraid, Sterling. Afraid of not being enough. Afraid we'd find out who you really are. You don't know anything, Sterling exploded. You were born with everything. Family, money, respect. I had to fight for every penny, take on dirty jobs to survive. Violet took a step forward, instinctively shielding her daughter. Dirty jobs like destroying people's lives. Like protecting my interests, Sterling retorted. Arthur was drowning himself in booze and self-pity. Someone had to keep the business running. By lying, stealing, forging documents? Arthur questioned. Sterling laughed bitterly. Do you think the Hartmans, the Webers, all those rich families in Milwaukee built their empires by being honest? I just used the same tactics they did. Aurora moved closer to him, her two dolls still held tightly. Grandma Hazel said that when people do bad things, it's because they've forgotten they were once children too. The simplicity of the observation hit Sterling unexpectedly. For a moment, his mask of toughness wavered, revealing the wounded boy who had grown into the bitter man before them. You don't know anything about my childhood, he said, his voice softer. Yes, I do. You were lonely and sad, just like I was before I found my family. Aurora held out one of the dolls to him. Grandma Hazel made two dolls because she knew that sometimes people need to learn how to be good again. The innocent gesture of the child offering the doll to the man who had tried to destroy her family created a moment of absolute silence. Sterling looked at the doll, then at Aurora's sincere face, and something inside him broke. I didn't want it to come to this, he murmured, refusing the doll, but unable to maintain his threatening tone. When I started working for the rival company, it was just to earn some extra money, but then you lost your way, Arthur finished, his anger being replaced by something close to understanding. Just like I lost my way in a bottle when Mariana died. Sterling collapsed into an old chair, covering his face with his hands. The Hartmans paid me well to sabotage the construction company. At first, it was small things, delivery delays, problems with suppliers, but when I saw you were vulnerable after losing your wife, I thought I could take it all. The confession brought 20 years of lies and manipulation to light. Sterling revealed how he had been systematically undermining the company, diverting clients and creating problems only he could solve, making himself indispensable while destroying everything from within. But you didn't count on Hazel, Violet said. That woman was a ghost. She knew things about me that even I didn't remember, as if she had access to information that shouldn't exist. Sterling looked up, staring directly at Aurora. And you always knew who I was, didn't you? Aurora nodded. Grandma Hazel said you were also a person who needed help. You just didn't know how to ask for it. Did Hazel try to reach out to you? Arthur asked, intrigued. Sterling hesitated, then nodded slowly. 2 years ago, she showed up at my office. She said she knew everything, but would give me a chance to confess and repair the damage. I threw her out. I told her she was just a crazy old woman. And she never contacted you again? Not directly, but strange things started to happen. Documents I was sure I had destroyed reappeared. Recordings of conversations I didn't remember having. It was like she was always one step ahead. Aurora smiled. Grandma Hazel was very smart. She said sometimes we have to be people's guardian angels, even when they don't want our help. The sound of distant sirens interrupted the conversation. Through the dirty window, they saw police cars approaching the house. Edmund had followed Sterling there and, fearing for the family's safety, had called for backup. Sterling Price, you're under arrest, the police chief said as he entered the house. We have warrants for forgery, embezzlement, and racketeering. As Sterling was handcuffed, he looked one last time at Aurora. Why did you try to give me the doll, after everything I did to your family? Aurora tilted her head, as she always did when thinking about something important. Because Grandma Hazel said everyone deserves a chance to remember how to be good, even you. The child's words followed Sterling as he was led away. For the first time in decades, he felt something he had completely forgotten, genuine remorse. With Sterling finally arrested and all the evidence in hand, the family returned to their house as the sun set over Milwaukee. The chest found in the attic contained not only compromising documents, but also photographs of the entire family, including several of a young Hazel, showing her striking resemblance to Violet. "Now I understand why she took care of me with such love," Violet said, looking at a photo where Hazel stood next to Arthur's parents. "She really was our family." Aurora was sitting on the living room floor, her two dolls beside her, organizing the photographs by date. Her ability for organization and attention to detail constantly impressed the adults. "Grandpa," she said without looking up from the photos, "Grandma Hazel left one more thing for us." "What else, little one?" Aurora pointed to the new doll. "This one has something different from Hope. It's heavier." Violet examined the second doll carefully and discovered something sewn into its interior besides the normal stuffing. With extreme care, she opened the seam and found a small metal box. Inside the box was one last letter from Hazel and something no one expected: the original deed to a piece of land in downtown Milwaukee that was worth a fortune, registered in the name of Aurora Blackwood. Hazel bought this land with her savings as an investigator and registered it in Aurora's name when she was born, Violet read. She wanted to ensure that no matter what happened, her great-granddaughter would have financial security for the rest of her life. Arthur looked at Aurora, who continued to organize the photographs with the seriousness of an adult. "Did you know about this too?" "Grandma Hazel said money was important, but family was more important. That's why she waited until we were sure we were all together forever." That night, for the first time since they had reunited, the family had dinner in complete peace. There were no more secrets, no more threats, no more pain from the past to face. But fate still held one final surprise that would test whether the love they had built was strong enough to overcome any challenge. 6 months had passed since Sterling's arrest and the discovery of all the secrets Hazel had so carefully guarded. Spring arrived in Milwaukee, bringing with it a renewal that perfectly mirrored the transformation of the Blackwood family. Violet had enrolled in law school at the regional university, studying at night while working as a nurse during the day. The dream Arthur had planted as a white lie had become a reality through her determination and the financial support Aurora's land provided. The construction company had fully recovered, with new contracts and a restored reputation. Arthur had learned to delegate responsibilities, creating more time for what truly mattered: his family. Aurora was enrolled in a German-English bilingual school, where her exceptional intelligence and observational skills made her a beloved student. She still carried her two dolls everywhere, but now they were symbols of victory rather than reminders of suffering. It was on a sunny September morning, during Milwaukee's traditional spring festival, that Hazel's final surprise revealed itself in a way no one could have imagined. The family was walking through streets decorated with flowers when Aurora stopped abruptly in front of the German immigrant memorial, her eyes fixed on a commemorative plaque she had never noticed before. "Grandpa, look," she said, pointing to a name on the list of Milwaukee's founding families: Mary Ann Silver Blackwood. Arthur read the name several times before fully understanding. "Hazel, she used our last name." An elderly man who was the memorial's caretaker approached, overhearing the conversation. "Did you know Mary Ann? What an extraordinary woman. She donated a small fortune to this memorial before she passed away." "You knew her well?" Violet asked. "I did. She came here every week for 2 years before she died. She always said she was waiting for her family to reunite so she could rest in peace." The man smiled warmly at Aurora, and she always talked about a special great-granddaughter who was going to change the world. Aurora gently touched the plaque with Hazel's name. "She's still here, isn't she, Grandpa?" Arthur knelt beside his granddaughter, his eyes welling up. "She always will be, little one. Special people like Hazel never really leave." Grandma Hazel said that when all the people she loved were happy, she could turn into a star and watch over us from far away. The simplicity of Aurora's faith deeply touched everyone present. The memorial's caretaker discreetly wiped his eyes, and Violet hugged her daughter tenderly. That afternoon, the family decided to visit the cemetery where Hazel was buried. It was a simple but well-kept place with a modest headstone that read only, Mary Ann Silver, Hazel, mother, aunt, grandmother, and great-grandmother of the heart, reunited a family with love. Aurora placed fresh flowers on the grave and sat on the grass beside the headstone. Grandma Hazel, we did it. We're a real family now. To everyone's surprise, she took the Hope doll from her backpack and placed it carefully at the foot of the headstone. Hope wants to stay here with you. I have my family now, so I don't need her to feel less lonely anymore. The symbolic gesture of leaving the doll that had been her companion during the hardest years marked the definitive end of a cycle of pain and the full beginning of a new life. As they stood up to leave, Aurora looked back one last time. Bye, Grandma Hazel. Thank you for taking care of me until I found my place. A gentle breeze rustled the flowers on the grave as if it were a loving response. Back at the house, the family found Edmund waiting for them with unexpected news. Sterling from prison had sent a letter asking for forgiveness and revealing the location of more assets he had hidden from the construction company. He wants to make amends, Edmund explained. He says his conversation with Aurora in the abandoned house made him reflect on everything he's done wrong in his life. And you believe him? Arthur asked. Honestly? Yes. The letter is unlike anything I've ever received from him. Humble, truly remorseful. Aurora, who was playing in the garden with Courage, the kitten she had saved from the storm, interrupted the adults' conversation. Grandpa, what's going to happen to the sad man in prison? Arthur approached his granddaughter. Why do you ask, little one? Because Grandma Hazel said everyone deserves a second chance if they really want to change. Aurora looked at the second doll, which she still carried with her. Maybe he needs someone to remind him how to be good. Aurora's compassion, even for someone who had tried to destroy her family, was a testament to the wisdom Hazel had cultivated in the child. Arthur realized that his granddaughter had learned the greatest lesson of all. Forgiveness is more powerful than revenge. 2 months later, in a decision that surprised everyone, Arthur visited Sterling in prison. The man he found was profoundly changed, thin, grey-haired, but most importantly, with eyes that showed genuine remorse. Arthur, I don't even know how to begin to apologize, Sterling said, tears streaming down his face. Start by returning everything you stole and helping to rebuild what you destroyed, Arthur replied without anger, only firmness. I've already started. I've transferred all the assets I hid back to the construction company. And, Sterling hesitated. I wrote a letter to Aurora. I know I'm the last person who should ask this, but could you deliver it? In the letter, Sterling thanked the girl for showing him there was still goodness in his heart. He promised to use his time in prison to become a better person, and when he got out, to dedicate his life to repairing the damage he had caused. Aurora listened as the letter was read aloud, and then dictated her own reply for Violet to write. Mr. Sterling, Grandma Hazel always said that people can choose to be good at any time. I hope you choose to be good now. Your friend, Aurora. The forgiving simplicity of a 5-year-old's response to someone who had tried to destroy her family became a legend in Milwaukee, inspiring many to reconsider their own attitudes towards forgiveness and second chances. A year after the family's first reunion, they hosted a special party at their home. Gertrude prepared a traditional German feast. Hermann from the toy shop brought special gifts, and Sandra from the hospital came with her own children to meet the girl she had helped care for. During the party, Aurora stood on a chair and, with the seriousness she always showed in important moments, gave a speech that no one would ever forget. "I wanted to thank Grandma Hazel for bringing our family together. She said that sometimes people get lost from each other, but love always finds a way to bring everyone back. Now I have Grandpa, Mommy, Courage, my doll, and all of you. And Grandma Hazel became a star to watch over us from far away." The applause that followed was accompanied by tears of joy. Arthur looked around the room, filled with people who had become family, not just by blood, but by choice and love. Violet had graduated from law school and opened her own practice, specializing in family reunion cases and child protection. Arthur had become a respected businessman again, but more importantly, a dedicated grandfather. And Aurora grew up surrounded by love, security, and the certainty that she was unconditionally loved. That night, when all the guests had gone and the house returned to its cozy silence, Aurora sat at her bedroom window, holding her second doll and looking at the stars. "Thank you, Grandma Hazel," and she whispered, "for teaching me that family isn't just who you're born with, but who chooses to stay with you." A star shone brighter in the sky at that moment, as if it were a loving response from across the universe. The girl who had begun her journey begging on the streets of Milwaukee during Oktoberfest had become the center of a family united by love, forgiveness, and the wisdom of an extraordinary woman who orchestrated a reunion through symbols, clues, and above all, through the pure heart of a child who never lost faith in the transformative power of true love. And so the Blackwood family lived happily ever after, not because they faced no more challenges, but because they learned that together, with love and understanding, any obstacle could be overcome. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life a little happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you so much.